spaces. And yeah, I'm Kelly. My company is called New Earth Now. Just kind of wanted to prep you guys for what we're going to talk about today. You can download the regenerative community guide on the 10 steps of how to create a regenerative community on that little sign. But if you can't figure that out for some reason, just go to regenerativeCommunityGuide.com. And you can download it there. It's also on the schedule as well. So just want to make sure you guys have access to that. Just have you put your email in. You'll get an email that gives the Google Drive link to actually download that document. But first, we're going to kind of go over a little bit about my story and my background and how I got into this, and then go into, how regenerative communities are really solving almost every major known world problem. And so that is really what I'm going to start with. And then afterwards, we'll get into the more practical steps if you want to create a community, or if you're, you've been just thinking about joining a community, or you want to be a part of building a community or joining one. Just knowing these 10 steps really helps put things into perspective. So I wanted to give some practical application as well. And then I'll try to leave some question time at the end, but if not, you can always reach out to me directly. I think my website is on the providers area, but you can just go to newearthnow.world, and there's a contact us section, or I'll give you my email, which is kelly@newearthnow.world. So I'll go ahead and give you those details again at the end if you missed that. But yeah, so I'll just go ahead and get right into it. So just a little bit about me and my story. When I was a young girl, I really, wondered why the world was the way it was. And my goal was to, I wrote down in my journal, goal to take over the world and make it all unite in peace. It was just, I always had this mission, I really just care about the world and the people on it. And I remember when I was younger, my parents would fight a lot about money specifically. And that really made me feel like, nobody should ever have to fight about money. It's just a paper, it's not real, what matters is relationships and care for the planet and, solving world problems. So why are we focusing on fighting about little things like money, But the reason is because it's survival, People have to make money to survive. And so what I thought was, right now in the world that we're in, but in the future, we'll talk about that. But, what I thought was, well, that means that I have to make a lot of money to be happy. And that means that, if I can help the world, I can help other people make money. So, eventually I got into business, finance, investments. That was my bachelor's degree in college. And then I got into financial planning, really wanted to help people make money with that. But ultimately, was only I realized that financial planning really only helps people who already have money. So I got into debt planning and saving money on insurance and all these other things. And then I eventually got into real estate. And I really got into that business. And, later on I figured out this wasn't the way to go for me. But when I was in it, I was really passionate about it. I did agent work, flips. I ran a team of investors. I had over 200 people join our team. We had public speaking engagements with 100 people there every single month, a large group in Northern California with over 1,000 members. And, started being really successful in that, and did rentals and Airbnbs and things like that. But ultimately, I did that just for a couple of years, and I really felt unfulfilled. And I was like, well, why do I feel unfulfilled? I'm making all of this money and helping other people get trained on how to do this as well. But really realized it wasn't fulfilling. So I eventually got into, I actually realized what actually happened was I actually saw the Venus Project. So that's how I really got into, I don't know if you guys have seen the Venus Project. If you haven't, you got to check out this documentary. So I'll get into like how that led me to my path on sustainable development. So we do sustainable development consulting and those types of projects. So a lot of the problems that were facing humanity were still there as I was like seeing like, oh, I was only going to want more and more money if I follow that path. And, you know, just all of the devastation that has been done to the planet, the pollution that we see in cities, the waste of resources and planned obsolescence, the environmental destruction, just forests being burned for cattle and for growing GMO foods and things like that. It's just terrible, you know, natural disasters happening, disconnection that we have with social media and technology a lot, which technology is good, but we need to use it in the way that connects us and really provides a good path for us. But also malnutrition and disease. There's so much hunger in the world, homelessness, poverty, war. You know, you guys know all the things. Ocean species extinction. So how regenerative communities are actually solving this is by creating entirely new ways of living. So the Venus Project, I'll just go a little bit into that, is how we can actually change human behavior by actually creating the world, setting up cities in a way that's actually in harmony with nature, and we provide all basic resources plus more to the people that live there. And not only that, but we intelligently manage the Earth's resources. So we make sure that we're not harming the planet in any way, and we're actually knowing where our resources come from and where they're going. You know, so we have the whole entire cycle, the living ecosystem of how we are going to be building these types of new cities or communities. So city kind of gets a bad rap because when you imagine a city, it's like all concrete jungle, but we're talking about spaciousness between all of the housing and buildings and making sure we have very low density that we build on, making sure that we keep more biodiversity in the area. The Venus Project talks about using sustainable materials to build these dome-shaped buildings and have research centers and have healing centers. So research centers could be like education, but focusing on our uniqueness, solving world problems. So using technology in a way to actually help build these buildings and having nature integrated can actually help, and having like a resource library for people to come in and be able to borrow things like a camera or, you know, whatever they need to, like musical instruments, like any type of item, rather than having to, you know, have more of the ownership model that we have today, or wasting a lot of resources when we can really share on a large scale level, and we can upgrade these models as we go. So this will allow for a lot more human potential, creativity and innovation and things like that, rather than humans having to focus on menial tasks that really doesn't serve that higher purpose. So we can free up so much of that mental and emotional and spiritual energy to create and innovate. And so as we get into the more practical steps of how to do this, we can take small actions now to be able to eventually build whole cities that are like this. So right now we're working on community level and working with you know, spiritual education centers and eco-villages and retreat centers and things like that to provide regenerative infrastructure, but also new paradigm operating systems such as self-governance, new types of economic, new types of currency, you know, new types of health care and alternative education and things of that nature. So just a little about some of the projects I've done. I've toured about probably over 30 now eco-villages. I kind of started my journey after real estate and got into I went down to San Diego and toured many different sustainable communities and permaculture farms in that area. And this was in the beginning of 2018. And then I went to Costa Rica and visited a bunch there, Bali, Thailand, and really found out what's working and what's not, and just started developing a lot of contacts of who could actually start implementing, building these communities, making sure they were all done regeneratively. And so that's kind of was my exploration journey. And then I started getting into really creating my own business for it. But first I was at a company called Verdani Partners that does sustainable consulting for commercial real estate companies in environmental, social, and governance aspects. And then used the knowledge that I learned from that and really started implementing it into these sustainable community projects. So I worked on one in like Baja, California, Fallbrook, California, Costa Rica, Texas, working a little bit with the Venus Project to help them find land, Northern California, Manuel Antonio, and all these different areas. So you can learn more about that on the site too. And so I just wanted to get more into the practical steps here, since we have about 30 minutes left. So if you guys were able to download that regenerative community guide, you can follow along with that. So the 10 steps overview is going to be the first page that I'm going to be talking about. This is page 3. And so this is just an overview of what these 10 steps are. Establish a clear vision, mission, and purpose. Create governance and social operations. Choose an economic structure. Create a development plan and revenue plan. Choosing the best legal structure. Raising funding. Land acquisition. So finding the land and doing your due diligence. And then creating your detailed financial models after you find the land and make sure that everything works out. Building the community, that's kind of like the fun part when you actually start to get creating, but you can see that it's a while until you actually start building. So a lot of people just think you can start finding land and build right away, but you really got to create that foundation and really have the governance and social operations. And then the last step is to operate the community, so making sure you have all of that in place. So the vision, mission, and purpose, this is fairly simple. What you want to do is just create your vision, and I would recommend doing this whether you're going to join a community or not, but just to create a vision of the way that you really want to live. And writing that all out in the detailed format, like dream big, what would your house be like? What would the community be like? What kind of values would they have? So having your vision there, just kind of everything you want to put in that, and then having a mission of like, why are you doing this? What is, not just why you're doing it, but what is it that you're doing and what is it that you're solving? So the purpose is more of like why you're doing this. What is your main purpose for this regenerative community? Because every community has a different purpose. Some is just to be more self-sufficient. Some it's to change the world, some it's to really go into healing processes and help other people heal, holistic health. So there's a lot of different reasons that you could get into this. And then values is another thing that I don't have on this PDF. So this is a free PDF, but I'm creating a full regenerative community development course that is probably going to be available in the next 6 months or so. But just wanted to get this out so that Grace could start thinking about what it takes, and like that's going to have all of the ways of implementing it and everything included. I also do consulting for that as well. But it's also really important to visit communities that interest you. So when you have your vision and mission, you can go and search for communities that have some alignment with that. The ones that you feel most aligned with are the ones that you want to, either you can join those if you really feel at home there, or if you're like, oh, this is great, but I know these things could be improved, partner with that community and create another one, or find other people that share the same vision and create one that way. So the second step is governance and social. So about 90% of communities fail just because of people problems, not because of, you know, the land or the buildings or anything like that, but it's always usually like the people. So that's why this is such a foundational piece of how to build communities. You got to choose your method for decision-making governance. So I really love sociocracy because if you guys haven't heard of Diana Leaf Christian, she does a lot of trainings on sociocracy. I took her 12-week course and really dove deep into how you can organize meetings and make decisions together very efficiently, and it really helps in community settings. Holacracy is also another model that you could use that's very business-oriented. And you can read, there's a lot of words on these pages, so you can probably read this later, but it talks more, that holacracy is more about, you know, what roles and responsibilities are you going to play. So if you're running your community more as like a business or have a business that you want to use these methods in, holacracy is a great way to do it. And then sociocracy can be used for continuing meetings and things in community. So we have a picture on here of hierarchy versus heterarchy. So in heterarchy, we're all leaders. Hierarchy, usually there's one leader and a bunch of other people. So really holacracy symbolizes how we can all work together and be leaders in our own specific gifts. And we're going to be having a New Earth Creation retreat in Tulum area in the next couple months, where we're actually going to be diving deeper into these processes, and actually, you know, everybody will be able to come into what their gifts are, how they can contribute, because there's a lot of people out there that think, oh, well, I would love to do this, but I don't know how I can contribute, or I don't think I have the skills, or whatever it might be. That's what we're doing in the community. We're doing it together, and not just that, but people, you actually do have amazing gifts and talents that can be utilized towards this. Maybe you just might not see it right now, but when you really dive deeper into this process, you become empowered and in working with people to be able to make whatever your dream community is happen. So that's just a brief overview of hierarchy being one leader and hierarchy being one leader and heterarchy. All of the lines are drawn from each dot to the next, so it's like we're all helping each other. You can see this circle diagram on here is a form of sociocracy. So you have your general circle, which is kind of like the representatives from each of the different circles coming together to discuss things. Sometimes the leaders, like the people that create the community, are in the general circle, and then we have branches off of that. So for the people who can't see this, there's business development, health and education, physical development, governance and economics, public relations. So these are just examples of different circles you could have based on what people's interests are as your community grows. So the next part of step 2, which is the governance and social, is really creating those processes, the community organizational processes, to set that foundation. So you have your intake processes. We have, you know, the roles, like I talked about, creating a shared mission together, creating agreements so that you can really know what you're getting into, and all of everything is clear ahead of time, so you don't step in and be like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be that way. And of course, that is going to come up. And this process really helps weed out, like, if people don't fit well together and work well together, that's okay. You know, it's okay, but it does help to go through this process to really see if working together with those people is really where you want to move forward. So also communication, talking about nonviolent communication is really important to learn together if you're going to be living in a community. And organization of schedules and meetings and decisions that you guys are making, and policies, agreements, all of that stuff. And we have a lot of the templates for this too. We can share in our regenerative community course. And then expansion. So if you guys want to have more people join your community, having an onboarding process would be important to create. And then the third step is economic structure. So this is value exchange systems. You know, we want to be separate from the matrix, you know, old paradigm way of living, but we do have value exchange. It does exist. So to come up with your own value exchange system can be very powerful. To be able to have like trade services and things like that integrated in your community. There's a bunch of different alternative economic structure types I have on here: time-based, gift economy, sharing economy, service exchange, resource-based economy, which a resource-based economy is what the Venus Project talks about. You can create your own currency. You can also have some sort of contribution-based equity share. So these are all important to figure out for your community, but also how you're going to do your value exchange among your group, as well. If this is like a retreat center and you guys are going to be sharing in the profits or the funds, or if the funds are going to go back into the community, how all of that is going to be split is important to know. The fourth step is creating your development plan. So this is really where you get into this doesn't have to be a detailed development plan. This is just a general overview of what you guys want in the community. What types of buildings are you going to have? What types of water systems and materials and additional structures and permaculture, you know, just kind of get a good overview of everything that you want in there. And you can start to figure out the cost. This is really where I help most of my clients, is in the development plan and also the revenue plan, which is the next piece of this step. So this, you can really find like different types of materials that you want to use, but there's so many out there that sometimes it's hard unless you have somebody that already has these contacts available and can actually know who to call and know what that specific climate needs. And because sometimes, you know, certain materials might not work in other locations, like in a tropical environment or a cold environment. So really integrating that into what you want in your development plan. And then revenue plan, just kind of going over this fairly quickly. Revenue plan is going to be how you guys are going to support yourselves and make income. And basically, you know, there's some examples out there, like Arco Santi, they create bells, and that's like their main income source, right? That's like one of the things they mainly do. And so I put a huge list on here of all the different revenue sources that you could create, but by no means do you have to overload yourself, especially in the beginning, with all of them. Maybe just choose one thing, like having a retreat center. That could be the main thing, or it could be creating these handmade, beautiful clothing pieces or jewelry or something like that. But just creating a way to make income and kind of knowing the market and what, you know, how much that will bring income, because you do need to financially sustain yourself as well until you can get everything really financially free and all paid off. But, you know, having that really helps in this day and age. So there's different types of eco-communities on here as well: eco-resorts, retreat centers, eco-villages, eco-town, eco-city, eco-homes, organic farm, co-housing. So you're really going to choose what type of community you want during this phase as well. Then the fifth step is the legal structure. So you're probably going to get a lot of help from a lawyer from this piece. So the lawyer can really help with energy choice and formation. So that's like these different entity choices I have down here: nonprofits, LLCs. The 508 church / spiritual, that one is really, really amazing for creating communities, because you don't have to pay taxes and you're kind of outside of the system a little bit more. So that's a really awesome tip if you really are considering creating one. Definitely look into the 508 church or spiritual center type of method, because it really is creating this new way of living, right? So sole proprietorship, you know, I wouldn't recommend going with that, but if you have to. You know, B Corp is more of a, B Corp is not necessarily like an entity, but it's more of a certification for a corporation, which is more of a sustainable way of living and a sustainable way of having a business. S Corp, C Corp, you have trust, partnerships, those sorts of things. I do have an amazing connection for a lawyer that works with eco-villages specifically, that really can do this in the highest and best way. So they also help with contract reviews, tax guidance, employment law, securities law, state and local compliance, so like how you're going to get your permitting and building regulations, real estate practices, and also loan options. So they can really help with a lot of different things that go into that joint ownership of property. And the next step is fundraising. So fundraising is very important. If you don't have the funds, this is where everybody kind of goes first, but you need to be able to tell your story, to create the pitch deck and the business plan and these sorts of things to show investors how serious you are. And so that's why fundraising isn't until the sixth step, because you really want to create your entity so you can receive funding. You want to be able to know what your development plan and your revenue plans are before you receive funding, so we can get investors on board. So you're going to put a lot of the information that you've already created into these pitch decks and business plans. And there's a lot of information on how to create business plans for eco-villages as well. That's going to be in the regenerative community course. You also having investor relationships is going to be really important. So you can do this at like pitch deck presentations, which is like the city summit events that happen, investor gatherings. Charity galas is also a great way to meet high-level investors. Networking events, and also charity galas. You know, people may even be willing to donate if you have a really amazing cause in your community. Networking events, pitching events, and then fundraising sites as well. So Everland is doing, it might have ended already, but they did a Kickstarter. Everland is a community in Colorado that's just absolutely beautiful. They're doing like a permanent Burning Man there, just having art everywhere. So it's really awesome community I got to visit. And so they were doing Kickstarter for theirs, and it worked really well for them. Start Engine is another one. Indiegogo, GoFundMe, Lending Club. So I put GeoShip on here as an example on Start Engine. They got an investment to build their manufacturing facility so that they can create these GeoShips to build villages. And then the next step is land acquisition. So in the beginning of this process, you're going to probably want to have this general idea of where you're going to want your community, so that everybody kind of creates the foundational agreements of like, yeah, I'm good with, you know, that certain area, because you don't want people breaking up after you created so much, you know, here to this point, where they're like, well, I don't want to live there, so I don't want to be part of this anymore. You know, like you really want to take into account all of these pieces from the very beginning, but you don't have to go into the details in them. So some of these steps can probably be done out of order, but this is just what I recommend. But being aware of the whole process from the beginning is very important. So you know the general location already, so finding the exact location is going to be quite a search. You want to make sure it has everything that you need, all the space that you need to build what your vision is. There's going to be a lot of due diligence in the process. Usually you start getting into due diligence after you put the earnest money deposit down to be able to get it under contract. And then you could have, one is the shortest time. Usually you need at least 2 to 3 to be able to do your full due diligence process. Sometimes could even take 6 months. So you want to make sure to get your inspections done, your environmental surveys, the biodiversity levels of the area, making sure that you're not harming nature. This is also where you would bring the permaculture experts in. You would bring in like indigenous and locals to really like help with the understanding of the spiritual aspects of this land. You want to make sure that you have proper water sources so that you can have either groundwater for wells or rainwater collection, or if you need to tap into city water as well, you know, that's okay, but I would recommend doing other types of water sources if you can, from the natural environment. Energy sources, so figuring out, you know, can you do solar there? Can you do wind? What, you know, how are you going to create your energy? Waste management. So you're really going to look deeper into a lot about the area, natural disasters. Also, can you build what you want to build there with the permits, with the building regulations? And what is the market opportunities in the area? Is there nothing else around for miles and nobody's ever going to come visit? You know, or is it accessible? Or if there is nothing around, that's perfectly fine as long as you provide transportation and people are willing to come to this beautiful place you've created. And then what are the local desires? You know, always making sure that you give back to the locals, because we don't want to cause gentrification. We don't want to impose anything negative on not only the planet and the earth, but also the community surrounding what you're creating. So those are all things to be looking into. Now, once you have your land and you've done the due diligence, this is also during the due diligence process, creating your financial models. So you not only want to make sure the land can do everything that you want, but you also need to make sure that everything is financially feasible on the specific land project as well. So some people are great at this, some aren't, and it's okay. If you have a friend who's great with financials and development, you can do that. Or we have some people that specifically do this and create financial models for communities, figuring out what your land cost is, your building cost. So this is going to be the development plan that you created, but now actually really getting into the details of the development plan. Making sure that, you know, the income generation, the revenue stream is going to be supported in that specific area. You're going to also look into all the financial feasibility of, you know, what are the development costs all going to be? What are the operational costs going to be? What's the labor costs in that area? What are the salaries going to be? So this is where you can start getting into the details, because before you find the specific location, you're not going to know exactly labor costs or salaries of that specific area. And then also adding in a contingency, because a lot of times expenses are a little bit higher than you think they're going to be when you plan it out. So always being conservative in your costs, and also having, I would say, a 20% contingency. So, yeah, I mean, the next step is building. So, yeah, I think that's, you know, we could get more into the financial details, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. The next step is building. So this is the exciting part. You know all the numbers work. You've purchased your land. You're really stoked on how we're going to set this up. Now you really have to get the people out there that are going to be doing the permaculture, the earthworks, the observing of the land, really taking time to observe the land and interact with it before you just start building super fast. Really having the indigenous come and bless the land and give offerings to the land, and, you know, just having that spiritual but also practical aspect to it. And really hiring the right people, having the team of architects and engineers that can help you design, and do at least, I would say, 6 months of master planning to really set before you even can break ground. During this process, you're also going to be making sure the permits are all set and you can get the permits in time. So for example, some places it takes 2 years just to get a water permit. So you want to do that in the very beginning so that you make sure you're not doing it later after the 6 months master planning, and then you have to wait another 2 years after that to be able to get these permits. So just kind of knowing what to do first, and then doing the rest of your planning, your designs, finding out what green developers are in the area, or getting them to come in from different places. So I have the 12 permaculture principles on here, doing everything in alignment with the 12 permaculture principles. If you guys haven't done much research on that, it's really incredible. piece. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but I'll go on to the next page for building. So this is the sustainable materials that I was talking about. There's so many different amazing options out there. You can do so many different designs and styles. Making sure that the materials are all ethical and sustainably sourced, all natural and non-toxic. There's things like earth clay, earth bags, aircrete, hempcrete. You can even use shipping containers and steel frame if it's a sustainably sourced steel, but recycling shipping containers is also a great recycling strategy as well. And bioceramic materials, which is what GeoShip is using, that we actually can get that material at a different source that's much less expensive than GeoShip as well, and you can create that sort of material with any type of building structure, geodesic domes, pyramids, regular style houses. You can create basically anything with it. It's made of quartz crystals, it's stronger than concrete, and it's all natural material. It's really incredible. Water efficiency collection and filtration. So you have gray water systems so that the water can come down and go into your shower and sink, and then you use biodegradable soaps, and then that goes to feed your garden and feed the plants around it. You can also do atmospheric water generation. You can pull water from the air and have healthy distilled drinking water, which you can then add minerals to. Wells and rainwater collection, I spoke about that. Waste reduction, reuse, or regenerating your waste. So doing composting. On-site recycling is amazing. They have pyrolysis machines now where you can actually turn plastic into fuel. We would hope to not use too much plastic or none if possible, but you can also make plastic eco-bricks for building if you do earthships and things like that. Energy efficiency, renewable resources. So we have all these different options: solar, wind, hydro, just depending on the location, seeing what works best for that. Renewable energy from utilities is even possible. There are some certain programs where you can get renewable energy from the municipalities. Cool roofs, so we have energy efficient techniques of building, such as sealing properly, cool roofs, and then geothermal HVAC and geothermal technology is really amazing because it actually saves 50 to 70% of energy, and it uses the earth, and they're not too much more expensive than a normal HVAC. So it's quite nice to have all of those options. So this is really what I help with too with consulting, is really getting into who's going to do what in project management and making sure that all of these are thought of. We also have landscape permaculture and gardening. Depending on what your goals are, you would set your goals for all these different sustainability features, and maybe you would want 50% of your food supplied by organic, maybe you want 100%. So that could all be determined at this master planning time. Drought tolerant landscaping, companion planting, and permaculture, sacred geometric designs. There's some beautiful sacred geometric designs that you can implement for your gardens, green walls, and then healthy products and clean, like keeping the air clean. So you can have a little organic shop in your community where you can get those items and have them for your community, such as Dr. Bronner's soaps and other biodegradable brands, green cleaning products, non-toxic paints, and obviously proper ventilation would be in the passive design of the home. So making sure that you're having clean air and your health and your well-being is also a very important part of building your home and your community. So the last step is operating your community. So making sure that you have a proper management team, who's going to be doing this, how much experience they have, how will they do it, what the costs are going to be. And then there's different service types that you can provide. Some is like a self-service type of mentality, and then expand. So like you build your own homes, you provide all your own meals, all of those sorts of things. It can be like self-service to create, like, where they're like a hotel kind of, where they're providing your meals and they're doing the entertainment. And this is more like Kinkara, which is the retreat center in Rise in San Isidro. I have pictured on the document, and they do like, making your beds and cleaning and all that stuff, but really just finding what type of service level, because it doesn't have to be one or the other, but it could be somewhere in the middle. And then the next page, operating, just seeing what the community contribution is, figuring out like if there's going to be an HOA or if there's going to be a minimum amount of time people have to contribute. I really like it where people can contribute in their own ways and not have to be confined by anything, but you can decide like how people are going to contribute to the community in a way that feels supportive. Financial management, so making sure somebody is staying on top of tracking all of these financials for the community is really important, to have that person there doing the bookkeeping and accounting and things, so you can be prepared for all of that. And then having community operations. So this is like when drama does ensue, making sure you have proper procedures to be able to have conflict resolution, or when you're making decisions, like how are you going to make decisions together? Just continuing those sorts of operations. Really, sociocracy is something that helps with that. And that is basically the end of the 10 steps. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, the regenerative development course on there is not complete yet, but what you can do is just reach out to me, schedule a call or send a message. My email again is kelly@newearthnow.world. And I know we probably have about 1 minute left, so I don't know if there's any time for questions, but yeah, I just wanted to end with that.
Woo! Thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate such a deep